I'm making a video of this not just for you guys, because I know your minds are primarily focused on the essay that's due Friday, but also I'm making the video for my online class so they can review it. So if you have any questions while I'm going over this, please let me know, but you should have a pen or some sort of writing utensil out while I'm going over the next essay. Better shut the door. Okay. So let's take a look first and foremost at the assignment due dates. This is going to be a group paper, meaning that you're going to have 3 or 4 people in your group, and your group will produce one essay. But that's not to say that you don't have responsibilities as an individual. There's also individual work. So now for the online class, yours is not a group essay, so make sure you're looking at your assignment sheet. Okay, so due dates. Monday, there's an assignment on Canvas for you guys to request your short story for this assignment. Now, of course, that's due at 11:59, so I'll remind you in class as well. I'll put together the groups on Tuesday so we can start working together in our essay groups next Wednesday. Is due in Canvas on the 19th, and then the final draft is due on the 21st of October. Any questions about the due dates? All right, so let's take a look at the assignment. The assignment, the paper itself, is the same both in the brick and mortar and the online class. In modern America, people are often accused of being disconnected or distant from one another. Usually, technology gets the blame for this disconnect. However, one of the wonderful things about literature is it can connect us to people who have lived in the past. For this assignment, write a 1,200 to 1,500 word compare and contrast essay in a group of 3 or 4, or by yourself if you're online, that discusses how the picture of society in one of the stories below compares to that of modern society. Since all the stories on the list were written before 1930, the picture of the world is going to be devoid of much of modern technology. In many of these stories, cars and airplanes didn't exist, a telephone was a rare luxury, and people still died of diseases like polio, smallpox, and tetanus. Yet despite all this lack of technology, people still had many of the same thoughts, desires, dreams, and worries that we have today. In your analysis of the story, I expect you to incorporate some or all the writing techniques that you've discussed or that you've read in chapters 10, 11, 13, 28, 29, and 31. Okay, so you're comparing the picture of society that is presented in the story. This isn't a research paper. You're not looking up what the country was like, say, in 1913 or something like that. You're just focusing on the picture of society that's presented in your story and comparing it to the modern world. Questions so far? All right, yes.
If there's not something historically in the essay, don't put it in the final. If there's not something in the short story that's relevant to that time period, it should not show up in our essay.
Yeah, I mean, if they're maybe discussing something like the First World War or something like that in the story, you might mention it. But yeah, for the most part, yeah, I don't want you looking up a bunch of stuff about that historical period. I just want you to focus on the picture of society that's presented in the story itself. Other questions? All righty. So let's dig into this a little deeper. For this essay, you will send me your 3 top choices for a story from the list provided. In a group of 3 or 4, you will analyze how the picture of society compares to the modern world. So by Monday evening, you guys will just send me from the list that's on this assignment sheet your top 3 choices for stories that you would like to work on. The reason for this is, of course, is I can get you hopefully into a group that has at least one of your story choices. Yes? It's on the assignment sheet. I'll get to it in a minute. Patience. Other questions? Okay. Let's see. If you want to use a story that's not on the list, you must clear it with me first and have a group in mind, but it would have to be a story that was written before 1930. Do not consult secondary sources or other previously written essays for ideas or theories. I want this to be your original thought, okay? So far. All right, once you've been put in a group, you need to read the story closely a minimum of 2 times. You can do this as a group or read it individually and compare notes. On the first reading, read for an overall sense of the story. Determine the appropriate criteria for evaluating it. On second and subsequent readings, take notes on the elements of the story that pertain to your chosen focus. 2 is the minimum, but in reality, if you want to write a good paper, you're probably going to have to read the story 3 or 4 times. A couple times before you write the outline and draft it. And then between the rough draft and the final draft, you have to probably read it again just to see if there's anything you missed. So I would say shoot for 3, but a minimum of 2 times. Let's see. After reading a story as a group, determine the main themes you see going on in the work. A theme is defined by literarydevices.net as a main idea or underlying meaning of a literary work that may be stated directly or indirectly. So these are major ideas, whether it's family, whether it's coming of age, whether it's racism, social injustice. All these types of things can be themes in a short story. Select a theme or themes you wish to explore, such as family, marriage, quest, betrayal, supernatural, sin, blah, blah, blah. Once you determine the theme or themes your group wants to explore in the work, think of ways that it compares to modern society. Remember, if you cannot create common ground, there's no purpose in a comparison. Okay, and we're going to read about this in the compare and contrast chapter, but what are 2 fruits that people often say you can't compare? Apples and oranges. I disagree. Why? There's common ground between the 2 things. You can compare the 2 things. What are some things that apples and oranges have in common? They both have a peel. Both kind of round. They both grow on a tree. Both have seeds inside. Both fruits. Okay, so there is common ground. You could compare apples to oranges. Now there's contrasts, of course. They grow in much different climates. They're different colors, generally speaking. The trees are different sizes, slightly. So there are differences between them, but there's enough common ground to do a comparison between apples and oranges. So back to the story. In order to compare a theme that is evident in the short story that your group is examining with the modern world, there has to be some similarities there that you're seeing, okay? You have to create common ground in order to do a comparison. All right, questions? Okay. Remember, you cannot create a common ground if you cannot create common ground, there's no purpose to the comparison. There will be obvious differences between the society presented in the work and the one that you live in. But what I want your group to look for is ways that we connect with people who have lived in the past. All right, questions? Okay, the individual work component. You'll turn in your discussion of a theme in the story as part of your individual work on the 19th, and you'll also be responsible to turn in a body paragraph of the paper on the 19th. Okay. The paper in total is worth 150 points. 100 points is the group paper, and you all essentially share that grade. The 50 points is for your individual work, okay? This is to assure that everybody's pulling their weight within the group. If you don't do your individual work, you don't get to reap the benefits of whatever the final paper turned out to be. So that's worth 50 points. The paper in total is worth 150. 100 for the group part, 50 points for the individual work. And I'll get to that a little bit more detail on that in a second. Now, in grading your final group paper, I'll be looking for a depth of ideas and analysis, use of supporting evidence, and overall strength and clarity of the writing itself. Please note that this is not a plot summary of the story. Do not write about what happens in the story, but rather how the societal issues of the past compare to the modern world you live in. When you are writing, assume the reader has read the story. Assume the reader has read the story. This isn't a book report. This is an analysis. Okay? And you are writing this paper to give the story more depth than it would have than by just reading it. Now, there is a plagiarism alert. All of your work on this paper should be original. It is not necessary to use outside sources in this paper, okay, unless you're looking up a term or an item or something that they're talking about in the essay or the story that you don't know what it is. There will be a no tolerance policy on plagiarism for this paper, so you do not copy from any internet sources, reviews, etc. Imagine how annoyed your group members would be if the group paper got a 0 because you plagiarized your paragraph. Okay? So make sure that you do not use any outside source material. Make sure that everyone in the group follows this policy. All right, questions. Now, to be clear, and this only applies to the group essay, not the online classes essay. If one person plagiarized their paragraph, yes, the group would get a 0, but I would allow the other 3 members of the group to revise the essay, and the person who plagiarized would just be stuck with the 0. Okay? That's how that would work. Yes. And I'll get to that in just a second. Other questions? Only one person in the group has to submit the paper, and it'll show up in Canvas for everyone once I get the group set up. Other questions? All righty. Let's see. The formatting. You need to have an interesting title, a thesis, and answers to so what question. Fully explains how your story compares to the modern world. Be clearly and logically organized, free of grammatical and mechanical errors, at least 1,200 words, in a language appropriate to an academic essay, is submitted by the due date and time. Now here's the story list, and I've given you where you can locate these stories. In your textbook, there's a story by Susan Glaspell called A Jury of Her Peers. If you go to Project Gutenberg, which is gutenberg.org, you will see 1, 2, 3, 4 stories that you can use from there. Follow the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. Yes. It's not on it? We're missing a page. Well, then you were right to ask about the essay question. Really, they must have stuck together in the copy machine. Well, tell you what, let me shut off the video because that's pretty much done with the group part of it, or excuse me, the essay part.